Hi, Jael. Oops, sorry, my microphone wasn't out there. Hi, Jael. So I'm going to go over that question really quickly. So basically, they give you the reaction with the enthalpy, and then you're asked how much heat is released when 3 moles of zinc sulfide reacts in excess oxygen. So essentially what you always need to do with these, this is an example of a multi-step calculation because all you're given is the enthalpy for the reaction. And so what you would need to do in that case, because then they want you to figure out how much energy would be released for a certain number of moles of a substance. So in that case, you need to know what the molar enthalpy is of that substance before you can solve for any number of moles, how much energy would be released. So basically what you need to do is say if negative 878.2 kilojoules was released for this reaction where 2 moles of zinc sulfide are consumed relative to these other portions, then basically that means that you're like this much is for 2 moles, right? So we want to figure out how much is it for 1. So obviously that's going to be half, but basically the math is if we have 2 moles of zinc sulfide and oh yeah, there we go. And we have negative 878.2 kilojoules being released per 2 moles. So remember, if you're calculating kilojoules per mole, basically the units tell you how to do the math, right? We want to know the energy per mole, so you literally just take the energy for the reaction and divide it by the number of moles. And so that should give you negative 439.1 kilojoules per mole. And then once we know how much energy is released per mole, then you just need to figure out how many moles you want to solve for. So in this question, they asked 3 moles. So if this is how much there is per mole, then you just have to multiply it by the number of moles that there are. So in this case, 3. And that gives you negative 1317.3 kilojoules total. Which makes sense, right? Because you had about 400 per mole. You have 3 moles, so that should be close to 1200 if we're just rounding and estimating, and we're about there. So that's your final answer, and then you just put it into SIGDIGs. Okay. Now you also asked how to know when to do multi-step calculations. It's kind of hard. Like, I mean, I wouldn't say there's like one specific thing, but most of the questions that you will look at, a lot of them will be multi-step because a lot of times you need to get like the kilojoules per mole to answer the question. So even in the notes, here I'll pull it up a second, it kind of mentions that usually you need to be able to look for the molar enthalpy and then use the molar enthalpy to find whatever the question is asking, which is usually asking some kind of question about how much for this mass of substance or this many moles of substance, how much energy is released. Like for the rest though, I mean, there's no like magic trick to knowing if you're doing a multi-step calculation. The main thing you need to do is just have done enough practice problems that you can identify like what you would need to be able to figure out in the question and then get there. So obviously doing lots of practice problems is kind of your best bet for doing that. So you start to see like, you know, when you need to do more than one step. So yeah, hope that helps, and let me know if you have any other questions.